CityCast from Explocity.
The animals were shocked beyond measure to learn that even Snowball could be guilty of such an action. There was a cry of indignation, and everyone began thinking out ways of catching Snowball if he should ever come back. Almost immediately, the footprints of a pig were discovered at the grass a little distance from the knoll. They could only be traced for a few yards, but appeared to lead to a hole in the hedge. Napoleon snuffed deeply at them and pronounced them to be snowballs. He gave it as his opinion that Snowball had probably come from the direction of Foxwood Farm. "No more delays, comrades," cried Napoleon when the footprints had been examined. "There is work to be done. This very morning we begin rebuilding the windmill, and we will build all through the winter, rain or shine. We will reach this miserable traitor that he cannot undo our work so easily. Remember, comrades, there will be no alteration in our plans. They will be carried out to the day. Forward, comrades, long live the windmill, long live the animal farm."
About 2 decades ago, I offered Aakar Patel the job as editor of Explocity. And just when we were all set, the famous and reputable newspaper in Mumbai, Midday, offered Aakar the same job as editor. And, well, of course I understood. Had he not accepted that job, I would have forced him to. But you know what they say, when one editorial door closes, another, oh hell with the analogies. I heard that Tushita Patel, Aakar's partner, was leaving her job as editor of the Asian Age. I called her, and she hopped a flight to Bangalore and joined Explocity as editor, and totally killed. 20 years later, I am fortunate to count them both as friends, and not principally because they make that fried fish with that mustard thang. Anyone with even a peripheral interest in Indian politics ought to know Aakar Patel. And even though newspapers around the country have recently developed new and deeper shades of funk by not continuing to publish Aakar's anti-injustice polemic, he remains India's most prolific columnist. The context of Aakar's prose is serious, the tone often calling question to judgment, but you can sense a suppressed smile under every description. Here's an example of what I call the suppressed smile. In a socio-political comment about the inability, or at least unwillingness, of the Indian to be gracious in defeat, he uses cricket. In an article titled "The Banality of the Indian Cricket Fan," he wrote, and I quote, "It's about nationalism, which in India is narrow and zero-sum. If they score even a little victory, a boundary, our tumescence droops." That writing is not magic realism, whatever that means. But maybe I'll call this one "See Alice in Wonderland." The humor lurking beneath even the most serious of Aakar's writing is mainly because he sees the foibles of the hoi polloi as absurd theatre. In a recent event promoting the launch of his latest book, The Price of the Modi Years, someone in the audience asked him if he saw hope in the political scenario in India when viewed from the depressed side of the divide. "Yes," he replied, "but maybe it will take a couple of election cycles." "Thank you, Aakar," the audience member cried irrationally. "Thank you for saying that there's hope." I smiled and tried to catch Aakar's eye, but I could tell that he was too busy trying to figure out how not to become a prophet. Although in India, pundit and prophet somehow are synonymous. Today, Aakar Patel is a guest as neither prophet nor rationalist, but as a writer. And let's go ask him a bunch of questions about what makes him, above all, one of the country's most compelling writers. Aakar Patel, welcome to the Literary City.
Thank you for having me, Ramji.
That bit you narrated at the beginning, Orwell, right?
It is. It's from Animal Farm.
Any reason you chose that?
I think it's quite appropriate that we read and talk about dystopia at a time like this in India.
And Animal Farm does capture so much of that dystopia for people, doesn't it?
I think those who are literate and do not believe in the idea of a utopia and believe that all government improves only through small measure, not through messianic fervor, not through one individual, will think of Orwell and Animal Farm as being the book that defines their a skepticism. I would certainly say that what was true in this book of socialism is true certainly of Hindutva, and I think on the cusp of year 9, the data shows it to be true.
And that you've captured incontrovertibly in your book, The Price of the Modi Years. Now, we know Animal Farm defines modern politics. The other one is Yeats's Second Coming, isn't it?
It's the rare person who's read that poem and who will understand the reference to Bethlehem and what the beast is and why it is that we are slouching, or whether it is that we are slouching towards Bethlehem. I think for many people in India, there appears to be no recognition of the fact that there is a slouching beast. Indeed, for many of us, it seems to be on the same set of numbers, on the same data. Two very large sets of people can disagree on what they represent, which appears to be the case in our country today.
So people find new conclusions to math?
I just like to view this as a writer, and I find it interesting that what seems to many people to be quite black and white, black on one side and white on the other, to many other people seems to be white on one side and black on the other.
And that's a very interesting way to look at the chessboard. Another passion we share, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Tempting as it is to discuss politics with you for the entire segment, this is called a literary city, and into that I must segue. In your translation of Saadat Hasan is Manto. Is that right, Manto?
Yes.
In the essay titled Why I Write, you translate him as saying that writing is an addiction. Is it an addiction for you?
I think it becomes one. I don't think we start off. I mean, obviously, the nature of addiction is the drip, drip, drip that goes into your body, and then you can't do without it, right? So there has to be some element of doing something before you become addicted to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that the reason it is addictive is that the only time one really understands a subject is when one writes about it, which is what writing is. While we think, we might believe ourselves to have fully understood something, but when we communicate it to ourselves through writing, that's when we realize that there are holes in what we are saying.
Please don't say that's the reason that people highlight passages in books that they read.
I've never done that. Ram Guha once said that people who don't do that never write books. I don't know what he meant by that.
Right, like he's written any books. Okay, so if you had to write Manto's essay, Why I Write, what would it have said?
He, for the most part in his essay, he talks about the fact that he writes for a living. He goes off from Bombay, which he loves, and then he goes off to Pakistan, living in Lahore. He gets a flat in a building that Manishankar Iyer was born. So the place is called Lakshmi Mansions on the Lahore Mall, in what used to be one of the Hindu areas of Lahore. And he doesn't have work because, having left Bollywood, he doesn't have work in the film industry, obviously, there. So he writes his memories of film stars like Ashok Kumar, who we knew quite well, and makes money out of writing these biographical sketches of these actors for the Urdu papers there. And they are really hungry to know about Bollywood. So he writes primarily to make a living. And in that essay, he describes how it is that he goes about it. And in the end, if I have it right, he says that it's like a pickpocket. The thing just comes out, in the end. Once the pen touches paper, your thoughts tend to wander into spaces and you ask yourself whether this makes sense or not. I suppose it's the converse of what writer's block is, that there's too much of it. It's interesting.
And then Samuel Johnson said, no one but a blockhead ever wrote, except for money.
Yeah. I wonder what he would make of the present times when most people write not for money. So you have Twitter, you've got Facebook. More people write today. More people are read than have been before in human history. And that's sort of interesting to me. I think that we have this hallowed list of people who are supposed to be writers or great writers. I wonder if that will remain the case 100 years from now when everybody is writing or communicating in some way.
So it's not just letters to the editor gone wild.
Yeah, I think that does a Twitter account over 3 years with, I don't know, sort of 100,000 words in total constitute something similar to a book? It's different.
Now, that presumes that there are people who read. You once wrote of Naipaul's allegation that Indians don't read. So are you satisfied that you are being read?
I don't know if I am. I think Naipaul's quite right in absolute numbers. I think the reference that he makes is to Gandhi's autobiography, where he says that Indians revere people more than read them. And I think it's very difficult to argue against that. Um, your listeners might like to know that a bestseller in India in the non-fiction space could be as small as a print run of 3,000 books.
You're pointing out that a book that sells 3,000 copies is a bestseller, correct?
It could become, yes, indeed. My books have gone onto the bestseller list, but I know for a fact that the print runs are 5,000, 6,000 copies. What I'm saying is that there is an objective fact that my book A is on the bestseller list, B has a print run of only 6,000 copies. So it demonstrates what Naipaul is saying in a very real way.
Somewhat distressing.
It is.
In one of your columns, you commented on the Hobbesian sense of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hobbesian how? Are you saying that we don't have a sense of community in our writing and that we are all Atma and solipsism?
You do. I think that the Hobbesian nature comes out of something which is given to social media as well. So people want to come and bark at other people on social media rather than to express themselves in any positive sense. And I think that's one reason why Indians have taken to social media in the ways that they have.
Because we tend to talk at people and not to them?
Indeed, well put. That is what it is that we do. And I think that it's.
I find it a problem at social engagements. Everyone's talking at everybody else and no one's listening.
Yeah, there's a military historian called Stephen Cohen who says that when an Indian diplomat meets his U.S. counterpart, the Indian normally regurgitates all of the history of, and the other guy has no idea what he's talking about because he's only been briefed with what he's supposed to be talking about at that point in time. But the Indian wants to demonstrate the fact that this is what it is and that he or she knows.
I've seen this, and often not even grammatically. Now, grammar. What examples of poor language would tend to piss you off the most?
I think visually, I find the usual stuff of putting the apostrophes, the use of words that is either cliched or stock phrase, which makes the eyes glaze over, lazy writing, very hard to go through it. Bureaucraties, which is what we write in for the most part, even if we are not bureaucrat.
Right. I call that sola topi English.
Yes, it is. But the sola topi was worn by somebody who actually knew the language.
Did we lose links with the language in 1947?
I don't know if like a corporeal body is necessary for you to have a link. I think that the material that you read and you write and having somebody correct you when you read and write is important. Which is what we may have lost. It's difficult even for intelligent Indians to be able to write material that is widely read because of the problems with the language. That the quality of the idea doesn't shine through because the words deaden it.
Now, you spoke of correctness in punctuation and grammar. Now, I think that correctness is correctness. It doesn't have to be only in grammar and punctuation. Now, the latitude that we give ourselves in English, I don't think we give ourselves in Indian language writing. Now, you edited a Gujarati paper. Now, do people come up and write in bad Gujarati and still get published?
No.
Which is my point.
And one reason might be that the only people who write, once again, going back to the idea that there are a set of people who are writers and the rest of us who receive, the only people who would be writing there would be people who would be seen as writers. And I'm talking purely of the people on the opinion and the literary pages, which, by the way, language papers have a lot more than English does. There's much more literature in our language.
I don't doubt that. I resist all attempts at calling English a mutable language and giving ourselves excuses for poor grammar and bad usage.
That's a very fine observation. I don't think I've thought of this before, but I think you're right that the elasticity of the way that we think about and use English doesn't really apply to the use of the other languages, where we would rigidly insist on there being a kind of correct form of expression.
Speaking of all this, let's turn on the selfie camera on your phone. Now, all the texts that I've ever received from you have been punctuated with anal precision. And then you went and found Twitter.
Yeah.
And you abandoned all form. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like the librarian who suffers in silence all day at work and then goes home and turns the music on full volume.
I I like Twitter because I use it to entertain myself, and I think that I enjoy the pigeon that we use, that we deploy, and I think that within us, within the South Asian circle of people, we can communicate things, ideas, stupidities quite well in a way that the rest of the world might not be able to look at and understand. I think that our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, our lyricism can come through in spelling, and I'm trying to explore that, or at least was trying to explore it. Don't think I've been doing too much of that in the last few days.
Truth be told, I enjoyed your patwa.
I think that we are a nation. I think we are more attracted to the slapstick than other cultures, even at the literate level. Khushwant Singh sort of written about it slightly more deeply. Pointing out to the fact that there's no real writing that's funny. But I think that we do have this aspect to us where we find silly things funny, and I certainly do.
Now, your prose is not defined by its floweriness, but by the absence of flora. Now, was pithiness a conscious decision that you made growing up?
Not growing up, but once I started writing, and um, the idea is, as Naipaul puts it, that writing should be transparent and like water. The reader shouldn't be scratching their heads over what it is that you're saying. They should be considering what you mean. But that only came to me after I started writing.
To belabor that point, a lot of your writing recently is protest writing. Protest writing is historically dramatic and with flair, and that comes easily to poetry and song. How do you bring it to prose?
You're quite right. I think that protest is best when it's lyrical, because you're trying to tap into the emotional side of the person or the people that you're reaching out to. So for me, one part of my writing is to try and this is based purely on the experience I've had with the nonprofits that I work for.
Amnesty International, which you chair in India, correct?
Indeed, absolutely. Yes. So there is a manner in which they go about their work. When Amnesty got the death penalty removed from Europe, or when it made sure that the European nations saw torture in a particular way, it was done through a series of separate, disparate, but then ultimately linked up efforts that started with the evidence gathering and then went into how it is that you could advocate for it or you could campaign for it. And I think that science, if you were to call it that, or that crafts, it is certainly a craft, is what I'm trying to communicate to the readership. That there is a way in which you can use your Twitter account or your Facebook account or your family WhatsApp group to be able to bring the middle to your side, which is ultimately what campaigns seek to achieve. And how it is that you can do that is what my next book is concerned with.
Several years ago, I reviewed Kushwant Singh for the Indian Review of Books, and the book I reviewed had the line, "Humor is dangerous in a hungry land." Now, you write serious stuff for a market that is not given to humor by rote, which is why I say that your writing has that humor, but it is in the sense of that suppressed smile.
I I entertain myself greatly, so I can't deny that you're right. I write for myself.
So, in your upcoming book, you're going to talk about how to use humor in a non combative way to get through to others.
I think that the middle constitutes of people who are willing to listen to you if you're not talking about the things that they are most passionate about. So if I were to talk about the price of petrol, not from the point of view of the government, but something else, I might be able to engage with somebody who might otherwise not be willing to engage with me. And I think that is what you do or try to do through humor. It can't be aligned too much towards satire, because then that puts people off because they know what is meant. But if it's just mad humor, if it does have nothing to do with anything, you have a good chance of being able to engage people that you might otherwise not be able.
See, I'm going to double down on my suppressed smile analogy.
Yeah, there's something of a peasant to me, and I think that comes out in what I write, even if I try to suppress it by trying to act, scholarly or whatever, which I can't really well. I think the funny part of writing is what makes me. My best job in newspapering was sort of editing a tabloid and giving, headlines that were tabloidy, and yeah,
Cultures, what are you going to do?
yeah,
Now, to talk about translations, which you have done substantially.
yeah.
Now, to be a good translator, do you need to be skilled in the source language as a writer, or can you be a skilled reader?
Skilled reader is all you need to be. You need to be a competent writer in the language you're writing into.
And what do you do with idioms? How do they fly?
It depends on the writer, I suppose. The one that I translated, well, I've translated two writers, one in Gujarati, who's the prime minister, and one is Manto. Manto is very conversational,
Uh huh.
very relaxed style. So his tone, if I may use that word, is easy for the translator to grasp, and therefore easy to replicate, even without the same words going in. You can communicate the same meaning.
And what do you do with the impossible to translate idiom?
I would just avoid it. Stuff that, like, I feel that the translator doesn't have to do it line by line. That as long as the meaning of the paragraph, the composed paragraph is communicated, the length of what you are writing on their behalf is not really particularly important.
I
Um,
I reckon that's what Jorge Luis Borges once said. The original is unfaithful to the translation.
in his case, because all of his stuff which I have accessed has not, none of his stuff has been in Spanish, so I presume that he's got somebody really good that he likes.
I know that you took Urdu lessons. Now, was that to translate Manto, commitment, or hobby?
No. The two are not related. I was working in Bombay in my early 30s, and I started learning a series of languages. Arabic. I took Arabic classes, and I know you know the script as well.
Yes, I
I
do.
took Farsi classes. The script was the same. So the Arabic classes happened at the university. The Farsi classes happened at the center that Iran was running, the consulate. But all of that ultimately meant that I could read the alphabet. So I didn't teach myself the script to do the translation. I knew it reasonably well before I started.
You were raised in Surat in Gujarat and you worked in your family's textile business. But growing up, what did you read?
So there were two phases. The first phase was before my teens, when I read the classic English works that were popular then, Enid Blyton, which the books you could buy at the railway station. There was only one bookstore in Surat,
Mm.
and which didn't have too many books. And this was a city of, I don't know, about 2 million then. So not a culture that was particularly interested in reading. But Enid Blyton, the famous five, Secret Seven, and then some of the Americans, the Hardy Boys, and so
Like
on.
like Nancy
And this
Drew.
was, yes, Nancy Drew. And then in my teens, I noticed that my father had books in the house which I hadn't read. James Hadley Chase, Sidney Sheldon, Irving Wallace. And I think for many years I stuck with that. And I really enjoyed that period of my life where you're coming into puberty, you're reading about a world that is adult, not just in the sexual sense, but also in the sense that you recognize the difference between Irving Wallace and, say, Enid Blyton. It's not and you can't go back to those books again. Woodhouse is somebody that I read in this period as well in my late teens, and I sort of enjoyed the flavor of his conversational writing. And then there was a gap. I think that I didn't read much between the ages of 20 till about my mid 20s when I moved to Bombay looking for work, which I found in journalism. And then a second phase of reading began, which was almost all of it nonfiction. So that I would separate it in this way. There was also, of course, reading that you had because of school. Some,
Right. School textbooks like
um,
Julius Caesar
yes,
and
but
so on.
correct, which didn't really make any kind of impression on me for the most part, because I saw them purely as texts to be memorized without really understanding them or engaging with the words.
Oh, I think that James Hadley Chase should be, required reading for all aspiring writers, as Woodhouse. But you said James Hadley Chase, and to me, there's no better line than the atmosphere was so thick that you could lean on it.
Yeah, he's fun to read. I think he's a good. He plots really well. So I think that that's something you realize more when you're writing fiction yourself, which I am trying to do. But one part of the novelist is how do you move things along, and how do you keep people interested while you're moving things along? And I think the most popular novelists are ones who can keep the reader going beyond page 27. At some point, you could just not be bothered. As somebody said, I think there was this film reviewer, I believe he was or she was writing for the New Yorker, who would leave after 5 or 10 minutes if they felt that the film was bad, saying that they already have my money. I don't want to give them my time. So that's true also of books for me. And it's creditable for.
Didn't change the trajectory of the film, did it?
Yeah. There's another story from also from a film reviewer who was subjected to this very long film on the Ten Commandments, and he stood up and called out the name of the director. I can't remember what the name was, and said, "Let my people go." So
that is hilarious. I think it was Cecil B. DeMille. Anyway, on that note, so I'll let you go now, Aakar Patel. Thank you so much for being on the Literary City.
Thank you very much for having had me, Ramji.
And now I'm going to be back soon with that joyous thing that we do called What's That Word? All right, and here it is now. What's That Word? That delightful segment where we look at words and phrases that we use commonly but never stop to think about where they came from. And to help me do this is my co-host, and as always, I will let her introduce herself. Well, take it away, Polly Parrot.
Hi, my name is Pranati, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
Hello, P with an A. How's everything? How's the weather? Have you stopped whinging about the weather yet?
I've only started. It's so hot.
Oh, come on, right. It's like 31 degrees now. That's 85 degrees for our US listeners. Now, that's midsummer for Bangalore, but they do say that we Bangaloreans complain about the weather more than we should. In fact, some might call this paradise weather.
Listen, it's all relative. We have cool weather all year, so I'm within my right to complain about 31 degrees.
Some people might disagree with that.
Those people are hoi polloi.
What?
Hoi polloi.
That's a weird thing to call them,
Well, you used hoi polloi in your interview with Aakar Patel, and now I can't stop saying it.
What? You mean you walk around the house saying hoi polloi to no one in particular?
Well, now you're making me sound like a lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I want to know what it means. So let's not spend time discussing the weather. Do your thing.
Okay, P with an A, what's the word?
Hoi polloi.
There, you're doing it again. Oh, that was your segue. I get it. All right, fine. You go first. Tell me what you know of that phrase.
Yeah, so hoi polloi, it means commoners, the masses.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it means.
Yeah, but now the etymology. Give me the whole 9 yards.
All right, I will. And here goes. The term, I apologize, is of Greek origin.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah, completely. Everything is from the Greek, man. I can't help this. Anyway, the term is from the Greek origin. Now, literally translated from the Greek, oi polloi means the many. All right. So oi polloi is the many, and that has been used to denote the masses, almost right from its inception. Now, there are some examples of it in print, and, in its original Greek form, there's a lot of it. But the original Greek form, oi polloi, and spelt with the Greek alphabet, it dates back to the 17th century, and the earliest known usage is from a 1668 essay by John Dryden, and that essay is called Of Dramatic Poesy. And the line went, if by the people you understand the multitude, the oi polloi. You see, I think it's easier to understand the people than that sentence.
That's true.
But, people feel that the real time that phrase was adopted into English was by the famous American writer James Fenimore Cooper, right? Famous dude.
Baseball guy.
He used hoi polloi in his gleanings from Europe in 1837. It was the time that Americans gleaned a lot of gleanings from Europe. But in the United States, at some point, suddenly, hoi polloi came to denote the upper classes. So, this example from the Chicago Daily Herald in their 1984 edition, the sentence went, Brent Musburger, whose talks with WGN are continuing, was among the hoi polloi in the rich seats. Rich seats, how did hoi polloi people get in the rich seats? Now, it's not that they were just upgraded on the plane or anything like that. I think that the meaning got mixed up. So the hoi in hoi polloi, some linguists think, started to mean hoi, like high, and became like hoity-toity. So some people thought the hoi polloi were the polloi that were hoi. Now I'm a poet. See? Just before you think.
That's interesting.
Exactly. Just when you thought it's safe to get in the water, of course, there was linguistic debate on this. Right?
Of course.
Yeah. And there's some linguistic points of departure. So some fussy linguists felt that, you see, the word hoi in hoi polloi is Greek for the. So they felt that hoi, the is redundant in hoi polloi. And otherwise, they said that it's like saying the twice. It's like saying the masses, right?
You would if you had a stutter.
Yeah, but I wouldn't mock that because you know what? Will Smith might come and beat you in public. The hoi polloi would just beat people. What would we do? We'd say, respectfully, sir, I must disagree. Anyway, right? But linguists kind of, like they fought over it about the business of using of that hoi, and it came to the throwing of gravy at each other and beating each other with breadsticks, right? And that's how they fought over dinner at the Cunning Linguists Convention.
The what?
The convention with cunning grammarians and linguists, cunning linguists.
Gosh. I'm going to instruct the jury to ignore this puerile James Bond reference.
Oh, as you wish, Miss Moneypenny.
Oh, gosh. That's a terrible Sean Connery.
Sean what? No. I was doing William Shakespeare.
That's even more absurd.
Well, anyway, back to the core and sanity. So insisting on removing the article, some linguists argued, they pointed out that like English is borrowed hugely from Arabic, like words like algebra and alchemist. And in Arabic, al means the, right? So they say that no one ever fussed about the alchemist. Nobody said, oh, you can't say the and al. So it's just like that. The oi is Greek. And so everyone said, just leave it be. So now no one will say that you failed the Gebra exam.
No one will, because I didn't fail algebra.
Oh, really? Okay, fine. Okay, right. You're a math whiz. You just don't remember, that's all.
Of course I do. I do not yet suffer from the Zymer.
Huh? Oh, dear. Alzheimer.
Alzheimer.
Yeah, a close friend of mine. He lives in Moscow, works as a history professor, but he doesn't remember any history, so he's doomed to repeat it. All right, that was fun, P with an A. Let's do it again next week. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you also for the increasing popularity of the Literary City. So many people listening. It's humbling. Well, have a great week and see you again next Wednesday. Bye now.